Okay, so what we want to try and do today, or what I want to try and cover today, is 7 considerations for appointing a top director. And really it's just for you to think about what kinds of things are really important when appointing director, and also think maybe in your own space, how can I present those particular qualities better so that I've got a better opportunity to achieve what I want to achieve as a director and get placed in the places I want to get placed as a director. So for those of you who haven't heard of us before, we've been operating in the director space or the board space for 12 years now, and our focus is exclusively on working in boardrooms. So what we do all of our work on is what can we do better in the boardroom, which means we've ended up with components around education, we've got components around helping and supporting you to find and appoint directors, we've got components around the company secretarial and the methodology of running a board that we do on a retainer basis. And we have clients all over Africa and in other countries as well, including Australasia, UK, etc., etc. So we've tried to become companies' international partner, but specifically focused on African partner in this space of trying to make boards more effective. So what I want to really talk about and share is our experience of what we think a good or great director actually is. So what drives me, what drives us as an organization, is this difference between a good director, so does what they need to do, and a great director, which has the potential to really change lives. So if we're really doing what we're supposed to be doing on a board, if we're really taking a business forward and achieving all of the opportunities it could achieve, taking it into a place where it has the potential to get to in size, in scope, in impact, etc., then we have a really, really big opportunity to change lives. And if you just think about, for your own business, even if you've only got 20 or 30 employees, what is the impact if all of those employees were in a position to get a higher than CPI pay increase? What about if you, as part of your giving back to your organization, you could pay for their kids' school fees or give them an upgraded medical aid? Just think how many other members of their family would benefit from that and be impacted from that. And then you start to broaden that to giving your clients better deals so they make better profits and they can then give back into the communities they operate. What impact could that have? And that's what really drives me and gets me excited about what we have the potential to do as really great directors. Let's see if this poll works. I'm very interested to find out what kind of experience level everybody has. So the idea of these questions is really to uncover at the highest level. So if you're involved in multiple companies, what is the highest level that you are exposed to? So you either don't have any kind of directorship in terms of your position, or you may be a director, but it's only you, so therefore you've never really had any opportunity to have a proper board meeting or any of those kind of things. You might be on someone else's board as a non-exec director, for example. So that's what I'm looking for. How far have you gone in this journey to becoming a truly independent director? Just so I can get a sense of who's in the room, and also try and tailor my stories or tailor the feedback to talk to that. So it looks like we've got a good spread, actually. One other, I would ask you to put in the chat box. Do we have any chat yet? Yes, we have. Yes, we have. We've got them pouring in. Ghana, Kenya, South Africa. Fantastic. Good to see it. Thank you. I'm glad we got that sorted out. Tanzania. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So just for the persons who are other, just please put in the chat what that means. So what is your context? Does it mean you have some directorship experience, but you haven't got an opportunity to serve on a formal board? Just give me a clue on what that other means. I think there's a couple more people. Just tick one of the boxes which applies to you. Don't be embarrassed if it's little or none. I'm not keeping track of names here. I just want to get a sense of how broad a spread we've got in the room. Okay, I'm just going to close it now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, end. Someone says I can't see the poll. Never mind. So I've got some with little or no experience of directorship, some who who have attended or are attending informal meetings as executive directors, and we've got one with attending formal minuted board meetings as an executive director. It's great, and quite a few attending formal minuted board meetings as non-exec directors. That's awesome. And one attending minuted board meetings as an independent. So we've got all of the bases covered, which is good to see. So just as a quick recap, for those of you who may or may not have had much director experience, what is the role of a director? The role of a director is strategy, leadership, governance. That's it. That's what we do. That's what we're responsible for. We're responsible for holding the strategy, supporting the management to give us the information we need to make sure that the strategy is as comprehensive as possible, talking to other people in other industries, etc., to make sure we've brought everything, the best thing we possibly can to building this strategy. But the board must own the strategy. The board must demonstrate leadership in the way it is seen by the company, the way it takes actions. It does the things that we say we're going to do. It doesn't say one thing and do something else. And I'm sure all of us can think of examples where people have, and boards particularly, are saying one thing, but they're doing something completely different. They're saying that they've got the company's best interests in mind. Meanwhile, they're doing whatever they possibly can to siphon off something for themselves and putting themselves first. And then the other third part is governance. So what is governance? Governance is really about the way we do things around here, the policies, the procedures. What systems do we have in place for this company to help and support particular behavior, particular ways of doing things, making sure things are consistent, all of those kind of things. So systems reduce complexity, and a well-governed business is like a well-oiled machine. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do by when they're supposed to do it, and people have autonomy to do the important things without having to be told all the time, because they've got an understanding of the rules, they've got an understanding of the culture, of the policies, procedures. So that's what we need to be very mindful of as directors. And the other piece to just be really clear on is, where do we sit as directors in this whole setup of shareholders and management? And the critical thing that I just want to highlight is this relationship stuff. So it's around making sure that we understand that the shareholder relationship is fundamentally much more of a selfish relationship, because we want, as a shareholder, a return on investment. We've put time in, we've put money in, we want something back. So we're thinking of ourselves. We're not necessarily thinking about the company. And if the company just is not generating enough profits, or it's not paying out dividends, at some point we're going to get a bit frustrated and start to move in the space of a lot of the listed companies that are now struggling with shareholder activism, because they're not happy with the way the company's being run, and now they're trying to make sure that they impose their will on that board to try and change things. What a director's supposed to be doing is moving in the space of thinking entirely selflessly. So we have to move away from, I'm on the board to get some kind of benefit. I'm there for my ego. I'm there for my position in society. I'm there to get this amazing director's fee, and I'm just going to sit there and twiddle my thumbs and get away with as much as I possibly can. I need to be adding value, and I need to be adding value for the company and all of its stakeholders. I need to be thinking selflessly, working as a team, getting consensus and moving the company forward. And I get something for my time, but that's not the focus. And as far as possible, your director fee should form a very small part of your personal wealth or personal income, because then you are focused on delivering selflessly, not holding on like crazy because this directorship is a major part of your income. Ideal world. Difficult to achieve, but that's where we need to be aiming. And management has this conflicting self-S and all organizational employees and team members have this conflict between selfless and selfish, because you have a contract. Contract determines what you have to do to be rewarded and to be paid. And then if you don't get paid, suddenly selfish kicks in really quickly. So it's thinking about the bit in the middle. We're the board, we are the directors on the board, we must act selflessly. So this is our definition of what it means to be a high performance director. one that is obsessed with creating meaningful economic impact. And we think across of economic impact as anything that you can impact through some economic means. So there's usually money transfer involved in something, whether it's buying clothes for someone or sending someone to school or feeding someone or putting a roof over their head. The social impact usually involves some kind of money transfer. That's what we mean by economic impact. Anywhere where the profits of this business can make a difference, where the resources of this business can be utilized to make a difference to all stakeholders, not just shareholders. And it's our job as directors to drive that impact through our role on the board and the role the company plays in the economy. Furthermore, such a director is not afraid to have the tough conversations as well as doing the mundane aspects that together enable board success. So there's that mundane, I've got to get it done, be disciplined, go through the papers, read them properly, ask some questions. That's the mundane bit. But we also need to ask the tough questions. Where's the financial report this month? Where's the page 2 that gave us that brief summary of the things that were going right and wrong? Has the financial manager done it? Has the CEO put it together, whoever was responsible for it? This item here doesn't make any sense. Please, can you give me more information? All of that kind of thing. Matters arising. You said you were going to do this by this meeting. It's not done. That's part of our job. It's a really important part of our job to ask those tough conversations, or have those tough conversations. The other part is, what is the board responsible for? So a high performance board's one that through its rhythm and decision making holds the company accountable to a performance standard higher than it has ever had before. So if we want to drive this organization, this company to the next level, we must be pushing it all the time to perform that bit better, not get lazy, not get slack, not take shortcuts. We need to be performing better and better and better all the time in any way that we can. Whether we're doing something more sustainably, something that has less impact on the environment. What are we doing that? What's that value trade-off all the time? Where something is a destructive, how we rein that in. Where something is generating value, how do we increase that without pulling too far in either direction? Because they tend to be in balance. And usually you have to shortcut somewhere to generate a little bit more value. Not always, obviously, but you need to be aware of whatever trade-offs you're making. Walk that fine line. Excuse me, I need to get some water in a sec. And improve the value return on shareholders, but also other stakeholders, and on a sustainable basis. We want to do this month in, month out, year in, year out, not short sprints and then crash, which so many businesses do. We need to think forward. We'll look out for the potholes. If you live in Joburg, you'll know exactly what I mean. Look out for the potholes. Make sure we're aware of what might be coming and make decisions accordingly. But still take the opportunity, still take some risks, but do them with an open mind and having been through and analyze the situation as best we can. So why is good governance important? It's because we've had so many failures, and we continue to have so many failures based on fundamental bad practice. So accounting fraud, really obvious, but it still happens and it brings companies down. Lack of independence. You've got directors on the board who just aren't independent. They're all in cahoots and they're voting with each other and taking the business in a particular direction without actually having those tough conversations, without actually being independent and presenting an independent perspective. They're falling in line with whatever the most powerful person in the room is telling them to do. Or nepotism, where they're actually just family members and they're all going together and doing things in their own way. And lack of accountability. So asking those tough questions, holding people accountable. We said we're going to do this. What happened? Why haven't we done it? All of those things are absolutely critical. And they're demonstrated over and over and over again in these big company and small company failures. We just don't see the small companies. We just don't see the numbers of small companies. But if we do well, the upside is that boards with at least one independent director are evaluated as significantly more effective than boards without any independent directors. Because there's less likely to be groupthink. There's less likely for people to be sort of supporting each other and not holding each other accountable because they're afraid of being held accountable themselves. If you come in as an independent director, you can see a lot of those issues and you can start to deal with them because you're not emotionally involved with how the business or how those individuals got to that situation in the first place. We can start from now and look for a way forward. We're not being held back by all that baggage, by that monkey on our backs. So it's a really critical role to have in a board. And an increase in EBITDA is enjoyed by boards that have female representation around the table, have greater ethnic diversity, and conduct board valuations annually. If you put that together, it makes a positive difference. This is not something we should be avoiding. This is something we should be moving towards with open arms, because it improves things. It makes things better. So diversity is a real thing that makes a real difference, and it makes the business more profitable and effective as well. So why on earth would we not want to do it? Okay, so 7 considerations we're going to fly through now. Profile, so I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Then attitude and values, how does that fit in? Why is that so important? High EQ, we've touched a little bit on that already with how do you make sure you hold that safe space, you work as a team, etc. Skills, so what kind of skills do you need as an absolute minimum? And how important is experience, whether as a director or in business or both? And then last but one is bravery, so tough decisions and being able to stand up and make those tough decisions, have those tough conversations. And lastly, strategic thinker. So it fits in with some of those others, but it's really, really important that we're not bringing technicians onto the board who can't think strategically, or anyone else onto the board who can't think strategically. It's part of the job, it's part of the role, which is why promoting people up to the board can be so dangerous, because often they don't have a strategic way of approaching problems. They don't have that strategic perspective. And then we get stuck in the board talking about operations way too much. So we use internally a simple recruitment triangle. I'm not even sure where I found it, but something I've been using for a long time. Starts with profile, and it's really about what can we change and what can't we change. So I can't change your profile. So I need to make sure that when I'm bringing someone into my team, whether it's a management team, whether it's a board, doesn't matter. I need to make sure I'm really clear on what kind of profile the person needs to be that I'm bringing in, and checking that you are that right profile. Because I know that if I've got the profile right for the role, if I bring someone in who's got the wrong profile, it's going to be round peg, square hole. It's just not going to fit. There's going to be performance management issues, huge dissatisfaction because not doing something you enjoy doing, not performing the way we want to perform. It just does not work. And I can't change your profile. So the only way I can do that is to change the person. So get it right first time. And a board's no different. In fact, it's even more important at board level, because a poor board and a bad director can have a massive impact on the organization. Then the other piece is the values and attitude. Again, I still can't change your value set. I can influence them. I can't change your attitude. Apart from big stick was the way we used to try and do the attitude adjuster at school when I was at school. But that doesn't necessarily work, and it's usually short term. So you need to change your attitude and values. I can't change them for you. I can encourage you. I can give you some frameworks and mechanisms, and we can have a conversation about why it'd be a good idea to change some stuff, but it's something you need to do. So let's make sure, as part of our interview process, as part of our due diligence, that we check that the values and the culture of the organization are something you buy into, agree with, and you live to, because we need to be leaders in the boardroom, remember. So we've got to drive and lead, showing and demonstrating those values and those attitudes. And then the last piece is the skills. I can change skills, I can enhance skills, but I can't do the others. So all too often we look at, I need an accountant on our board. Well, do you really? Can't you bring someone in for the meeting to talk about the detailed stuff? What we actually need is someone who knows and understands and thinks about people and the impact on people. That's the gap we have on our board. That's the profile we're missing right now. So let's do this properly. Let's think about all of these aspects when we're applying for a role. Do I have the right values for this organization? Have I tested that? Have I any understanding of what kind of profile would work on this board? Have they even considered it? Am I setting myself up for failure because I'm the only person, the opposite profile? They're just going to gang up on me all the time because I've got a different perspective, a different opinion that they don't agree with, just because we think differently. All of those things need to be considered. So we developed a tool called the Contribution Compass, And the idea was to try and make this, the way you engage with this material, as simple as possible. I've tried many of the different profiling tools and found it really difficult without some kind of guidance to work out what the heck's going on. Whereas we've tried to make this one as visible and visual as possible so you can quickly see where the gaps are. Yes, you might need some training to understand exactly what that means. Yes, you might need some guidance to see how you can fix it. But at least you can see and understand where the problem's coming from, and at least try to deal with it from that perspective. At least try to do the work, get the help, get the support to try and fix the problem based on some kind of understanding of what's causing all these different conflicts. So we've got profiles, we've got 8 profiles. Everyone has a particular profile or a dominant profile, and it's a preference tool, so it's what you prefer to do. So activating is prefer to do new things, prefer to do something adventurous, something chasing the shiny new thing, the new technology, whatever it might be. Sustaining is doing the same thing, following a process, following a routine. Very different profiles, absolutely critical in any organization. And typically we have way too much of one and not enough of another. The other one is more about introverted thinking and extroverted thinking. So inspiring energy is about speaking out, talking things through, going through a problem with a team out loud. Refining is taking that away, thinking about it, doing some research, doing some processing, maybe collecting some data, and then bringing the idea forward. If you throw those two people together in a situation, there's going to be lots of misunderstandings because you're not seeing the problem from the same way. But in a team, we need someone who's doing the due diligence and digging into the data and doing the analysis. We also need someone who's seeing from a people perspective. We're selling stuff to clients, they're people. We're employing people, they're people. We need someone on the board who can see those issues, can see those opportunities naturally in flow. And if you just look at this diagram, we've got a gap in sustaining and inspiring energy. This board's going to struggle with understanding what they need to do and how they inspire the team and how they bring clients in and get them all excited about their products and services, how they connect the dots, how they bring the people with the things and the process. How do they make those two work together? Have we got processes? We'll probably find that our processes are a little bit clunky. They're not very well defined. They're not consistent. So our client retention is terrible because we don't have a system that supports keeping those clients happy. So that's the tool we use for the profile, and it links to what we call the governance compass, so you can start to see where the gaps might be from a board strategy perspective. We're going to have problems with effective leadership. We're not going to understand and have good relationships with all our stakeholders because we just can't see them. That's not what our profile is looking for. And we're going to underestimate or have not evaluated risks properly. Okay, so this is just a theory thing. Don't worry about it too much, but it's worth digging into, finding out more about. Ashby's law of requisite variety is really talking about how you need lots of variety in the organization to control all of the variety outside the organization. And systems and processes are one way of controlling some of it, but also having a variety of people and ways of thinking is ways of controlling the uncontrollables that you can't systemize. So it's important to think of that as an organization in the markets we're in now that are becoming increasingly more complex. We need to have more variety in organizations, more variety in our leadership to be able to get our arms around the problems as they happen and deal with them as quickly as possible. So we talked about attitudes and values. Very much board, you have to be a team player. You have to work out how you're going to interview someone and check they're a team player. They're really in it for the team, or are they trying to do something for themselves? This is often a problem for CEOs coming onto boards because they've been doing a lot of it for themselves. They've had nowhere else to go other than to make sure things are done the way they tell people to do them. Whereas on a board, you're now immediately working as a team of equals, and sometimes that transition can be quite difficult. They tend to dominate the conversation and do lots of telling rather than listening and coming to some kind of agreement. So it's just bear that in mind. Promise, vision, and mission. When you're bringing someone in, they have to buy into the promise, vision, and mission of the business. Otherwise, there's going to be a disconnect. Otherwise, they're going to start driving the strategy in the wrong direction. Organizational culture. Do you understand what your existing organizational culture is? And are you bringing people in that buy into it or buy into where you're going, one of the two, but they need to be a good fit for your organizational culture. And the board should have its own culture. It should be aspirational. We should have a board charter that defines exactly the way we act. We're always on time, we always attend all meetings, we always diligent, and we go through our board papers a couple of days at least before and ask any questions before the meeting. We always check our minutes before the meeting. We always check our matters arising before the meeting. That's what we do. That's what the board may do, but you may not necessarily get it right in the other parts of the organization. So let's make sure the board is demonstrating leadership. The board is adhering to what it says it's going to do. Company versus individual values. So sometimes there can be a disconnect between the values that the company has. For example, it might be just driving business, driving profit, and not all that fussed about people's home lives and whether they get time off and can they visit their children when they're sick, etc., etc. And if you have lots of people who have family as a high value based on their value set or their circumstances, there's going to be friction. There's going to be problems if we don't deal with it and deal with it sensitively. So it's really good to understand as a board, is there a disconnect? And if so, how do we deal with it? So 50% of directors say they understand the collective behaviors, norms, and values. 50%. This should be on the board meeting at least once a year. This should be part of what you talk about. This should be something you signed up to the day you joined the board. So it's something we really, really, really need to fix. Then the other part is EQ, emotional intelligence. We need to control our interactions with toxic people by keeping their feelings in check. So this is now we've got chat working. Has there anybody been on a board? So the ones of you who served on boards, maybe if just that you can talk about leadership teams as well. Who has had to deal with a toxic person and someone or other in that team has really battled to keep their feelings in check? Well, I'll just put yes in the box. Let's see, there must be someone out there. Gives me a chance to have a drink before I lose my voice completely. Mina, thank you. Yes, here we go, the yeses. Everyone's done this. So let's avoid this. Let's make sure we've got the right people in the team. Let's make sure we've got people with high EQ that are helping us and supporting us, because that's what this is about. Let's have a sensible adult to adult conversation, not an adult to child raging match, shouting match. Let's talk things through rationally. And identity starts from identifying our own emotions. It starts from identifying our own triggers and controlling our angers and frustrations, because that just fuels the chaos. So let's lead. Let's lead by example. Let's demonstrate that it is possible to have a discussion without having an argument, to be able to have an opposing opinion without ending up punching each other across the table. And I've listened to, but didn't witness it directly, where board meetings have literally got that violent. They're screaming at each other and throwing punches across the table. Let's not go there. It's not productive. So this is 9 characteristics of emotionally intelligent people. I'm not going to go through the list now, but it's worth reviewing in the slides we circulate afterwards, just to say, well, how far have I got? Where am I? How many of those can I tick off? Because then I know I'm on track. Then I know I'm going to be much more likely to be an effective leader and effective director. Skills. What do we need? Well, we need you to understand your legal responsibilities. You need to at least have read some of the summaries of the Companies Act. There's a great, if you're in South Africa, there's a great book called, or great book, it's a clear and easy to understand book, and it's a great book because it's thick, on the Companies Act, called The Companies Act Unlocked. Great reference material because you can go and find the particular sections you need, and it tells you what all the different components are of the Company Act that you need to be aware of. For example, shareholder appointing directors or shareholder removing directors, that kind of thing. These are all the things you need to do. These are all the things you need to think about, and it's referenced in clause, blah, 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 in the Companies Act. Reading the Companies Act itself is pretty tricky, but there's plenty of, there's various summaries and stuff out there in each of the regions that will help you identify what the critical things are that you need to know. And then you've got whatever other legal responsibility you've got in your particular industry, health and safety and other environmental impact stuff, whatever it is that you need to know about. So Companies Act, the big one we've mentioned, codes and standards. So King 4 in South Africa, now the ISO 37000 international standard. So well worth looking at that if you look at nothing else, because it's the new standard that applies to any country that subscribes to ISO standards. And it's not a juristic, or what do you call it? You don't apply it by law, you apply it as a principle. So you can't be you can't be measured against it the same way as you would be a 9000 standard, for example. But it's a really, really clear guideline of how you should be operating from a governance perspective. And interesting, all of the things we've been doing in the last 12 years are very well aligned with that new standard. It's almost like all of these different standards have converged on a path that we've been following for a long time, just because we saw it worked. It was good practice. People benefited from doing these things. It's just taken a long time for the different standards to catch up. Methodology and process. So how do you run your board meetings? How do you run the process of board meetings? How do you make sure your board meeting is going to be as effective as possible? What's the pre-board meeting? What's the during board meeting? What's the post-board meeting process, tick list, checklist, etc.? That's all about the methodology and process. So have one. We've used one throughout everything we do because we found it so valuable. So it's really, really important. It makes a massive difference to your effectiveness. Policies and procedures we've talked about. So are they in place? Are they up to date? Have you checked them? Do you know them? Do you cover them off every year in your board meetings? Or are they just invisible and no idea what's going on? At least check the important things like leave policies and maternity leave policies particularly. Do we have one? What is it? What does it mean? Has things changed? Do we need to adapt or update it, etc.? Demonstrate leadership. So I've talked about that a lot. We need to take all of the things that we have talked about before and demonstrate it actively, so people in the organization can see it and look up to the board for all the right reasons, because we are demonstrating leadership that we are espousing to the rest of the organization. Director versus management. There are various components that are very different from management. Management's about doing operations, doing it well. Directorship is about strategy, as we said, strategy and leadership, and they can be quite different. And it's not necessarily because you're a good manager you're going to be a good director. So you need to unlearn some stuff, you need to learn some new stuff, you need to think about this as almost a new career, a new development path, a new growth path, a new education path to become a good director, because it is different from management. And what are your duties? So key ones: care, skill, and diligence. You must take care when approaching decision making. Have you gone through a discussion process, or just all leap straight into this decision? There were a couple of choices, that looked like a good one, done. Have you actually thought it through? Have you actually discussed it? You've actually processed the information that's been presented, dug into where the gaps might be. Does it make sense? Is it comprehensive? All of those kind of things. Have you taken care? Like a father takes care of a child. It's a challenging, supportive but challenging role. We don't want to be mollycoddling and mothering, so we don't. It's not a smothering, it's not a holding, it's a challenging care. But it's making sure they have everything they need to develop the way they need to develop and move forward. We want them to move to a position when they can be independent as quickly as possible. And the law talks about that being the way a father cares for a child. Rightly or wrongly, that's what they're trying to achieve, or they're using the language of. So direction, values, leadership direction, challenge, resources, all that kind of stuff. So skill, make sure you've skilled. Do some training. Whether it's someone else's, do some training if you haven't done already. There's so much stuff you need to know. You're unlikely to be able to pick it all up just by even picking up a book. There's practical implementation, trying it, see it, try it again, fix it, change it. There's lots of implementation, practical stuff you need to do, as well as the theory. They go together. And it takes time and it takes effort. So do it, and do it properly, because otherwise at some point you're going to get caught out, or you're just not going to add the value you could on the boards you're serving on. And diligence, preparation, attention to detail, read the papers, all of those kind of things. Actually spend the time to dig into the detail. Don't just take other people's opinion. We all need to be aware of finance now. We can't just rely on the CFO to say, yes, it's fine. We need to dig into it and understand it and know what the numbers are telling us, because we're all signing off on those financials at the end of the year. And then the last part of this sort of duties is this act of good faith, act in the best interest of the company, avoid conflicts of interest, all stuff we talked about earlier when we were talking about that role specifically of being a director. And don't do things that where you use your position for personal gain. It's just avoiding those conflicts of interest. Just think selflessly. If you want to be a director, that's the state of mind you need to be in. And way too many aren't. And that's a challenge that we're going to have for a long time to come, I fear. So experience, coming into the home straight. So looks like we'll finish on time, and then gives plenty of time for questions. So experience, non-exec director of somewhere, somehow is the best possible experience you can get. Obviously, you can need to read the books and go to some courses and learn how the legal stuff works, etc. But go find a position somewhere. So whether it's a charity, it's a school, it's the other example I came up with, serving on some kind of committee, but experience what it's like to be in that kind of group of people trying to make decisions, or group of people trying to cover their arse. Understand why it doesn't work and why it's restrictive and why it doesn't take the organization forward, so that you don't repeat it somewhere else. But you need to live it, you need to do it, you need to try it. So it's just get onto anything you possibly can. I've been on body corporates and haven't been on school boards, but on clubs and like golf clubs. There's a golf club in the papers last week that's in all kinds of trouble because they didn't follow proper process. They got themselves all caught up in not having thought things through and made the right decisions. So get onto a golf club or a yacht club or a cricket club or whatever. Get onto their board, get onto the committee that runs that organization, and just see what it's like. Learn from experience. So governing bodies, and as an executive director, start to think about what are the things you need to be thinking about as an executive director rather than just as an executive. What are the strategic things you need to be thinking about? What are the other aspects of your role that you need to understand? Because it's much broader than just managing the operations. There's all kinds of other things around that governance compass that you need to be aware of, and as part of your role, need to understand. Business, we look at directors that have broad cross-section of business. So typically they have been an MD or CEO or in C-suite because they've had exposure to large areas of the business, but it doesn't have to be from those places. You can learn and get your exposure yourself by moving across departments or reading up and learning about how particular parts of the business work, understanding how marketing works and sales works and operations work and all of those different components, so that when you're on the board, you can see the moving pieces and get an understanding of how they work together. So it's really important to have a broad business understanding, not too focused. And industry. So interestingly, when we're appointing independent directors, we typically appoint them to an industry they're not part of, because otherwise you end up with situations where you're talking too much about the product and service and you're not talking about how to build a better business. We dive into talking about how to bake better bread rather than how to run a bakery better. So it's actually quite important for you to understand your own industry, yes, because in your executive role you absolutely must. But look for opportunities in different industries from the ones you're operating in, because the value you add is a clean, clear, independent insight into the way that industry operates that they may not be able to see because they're just way too close to it. And chairmanship, you may or may not want to end up as a chairman, but it's really useful to understand what that role's about and understand and be empathetic with the poor guy or girl who's running this meeting and is struggling to get his point across to try and bring everything to order and follow the agenda and all the rest of it. So yes, get some experience, then you're, as it were, coming from experience when you're sitting as on the other side of the table as a director, looking at this poor chairman struggling. You can help and support them to do a better job. I've just stuck this in because from an experience perspective, from a skills and abilities perspective, from an attitude and aptitude perspective, a lot of this changes over time, or the needs and requirements change over time as the business moves through these different phases. So it's worth looking up the 5 phases of growth. There are a few other models as well that talk about how businesses grow and change over time, because you want to be in a position where the board you're on is in a business that's in a phase before the one that you are now. Because then you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, because you've come out of the end of that tunnel. They're still in it. They still can't see a way out. And it really, really helps if you can lead them on that path lead them through the chaos and come out the other side because you've already completed that journey. But it doesn't help if you stick someone from a listed company into a startup because they're just too far apart. Their worlds are just too disconnected in terms of what resource available, how things get done, etc., etc. Can work, but it takes quite an exceptional individual, because if you've only got corporate experience, you really just can't understand the pains and the frustrations and the challenges that someone who's in a very early stage business is having. So ideally look at something just below where you are in terms of that growth and that curve. So bravery, calm yet fearless. We want you to be calm, cool, ask the difficult questions. It helps to be independent because you're going to be less emotionally engaged. High Q obviously critical in making sure you stay calm, you're talking adult to adult as far as possible, you're focusing on the issue, not the person, all of those kind of things. Self-development, so do the self-development, remove as many of those emotional triggers as you possibly can, dig into all of the tragedies and traumas you've had during your life that have caused those completely non-linked to the situation, those triggers that happen when you see something that looks like a particular situation you were in before, see someone who reminds you of someone that gave you bullied you at school or whatever it might be. Those emotional triggers are very real, but they're nothing necessarily to do with the actual situation you're in. So the more you can clear of those, the more likely you are to be able to stay calm in more situations and be much more effective. And boards will test you. So the more work you do on yourself, the more likely you are to be able to work and operate effectively in a boardroom. And be not afraid to make those difficult decisions. And that comes from experience, comes from trying things, failing at things on a smaller scale. So your confidence is building over time, but that's what it comes from. You've got to have the experience. You've got to be brave, have been brave along the road, and make the bigger and bigger and bigger decisions. And make sure you've got enough data, that you're talking to the team, you're bringing as many perspectives as you need to be sure that that difficult decision is the right decision, and then move forward. But at the end of the day, when you're standing on the edge of that precipice, you're not quite sure if I'm going to crash into the valley or if actually there's a bridge there, I can't see it. That takes guts. You need to be brave. So to be a good director does take courage. And not afraid to have difficult conversations. So if nothing else, start with the difficult conversations and work up to the difficult decisions. It's all about practice. It's all about reading, learning, doing courses, self-evaluation, self-reflection, all of those kind of things all come into play. And the more you do, the braver you become because you're less fearful. So not be afraid to have those tough conversations. This is a critical part of being a director, which is why being brave is so important. Strategic thinker, so always learning. I think I've got a name of where I got this from, but this was just some key highlights of what, there we go, from an article in Forbes.com. 3 unmistakable signs that you are a strategic thinker. So take a moment to read those 3. I'm not going to read them out. And again, I just pop it in the chat. Yes, I'm a strategic thinker, or no, I've got some work to do, whatever your reality is. But this is critical. If you want to be a good director, you have to be able to think strategically. And it does take time. It does take energy. It does take self-reflection, being better leaders, learning how to be better leaders. When's the last time you read a book on leadership? All of those kind of things helps support you to be a better strategic thinker, because you can start to see the bigger picture. You can start to see more of the moving parts. You can start to get your arms around some more of that complexity because you've read about all these different things and you understand how they move. It's a bit like playing a computer game. When you understand the algorithm that's driving the behavior of something, it's much easier to avoid it or to find it or to kill it or whatever you need to do in your game to move on to the next level. And business is a bit like that. As soon as you understand the dynamics of something, you can work out how you can control it and use it and utilize it to your benefit. So anyone brave enough to say, who have we got? Who is a strategic thinker? Who is demonstrating these unmistakable signs that they are a strategic thinker? Anybody? Come on, there must be someone. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Mutazo. Good to see. Thank you, Mina. Looks like, Mina, you've learned from some of those toxic people in your group. Forces self-development to try and work out how to cope with it next time. Good. Awesome. So if we're thinking as a director, we have to think about all of these pieces. We need to understand how we drive the strategy and direction. We need to own it. We need to make sure that it's written in a way and presented in a way that the rest of the organization can understand where we're going. What is our promise to the world? What is our vision for the future? And what is our mission? How are we going to get there through our products and services? What is our culture? Have we documented it? Have we actually talked to the rest of the organization about what we think it should be so that we can move in that direction? Effective leadership, stakeholder engagement. Have we actually got a statement of intent for our shareholders to say, this is what we expect from this organization by way of return? Have we got that written down? Having a really clear, detailed dividend policy that talks to, it goes this way, something goes into savings, something goes to investment, something goes, and then we pay the dividend, is really important because it just makes it a system that's easy to repeat. Anybody can do the calculation because it's really clear. There's no emotion in doing that calculation because it's been mapped out and agreed on months or years before. Risk management compliance. Are we actually doing some analysis of what our risks are? Have we got a risk matrix that we're checking in on at least once a year as a board? Financial results, are they clear? Are they concise? Can we understand them? Do we have graphs where we need them? All of those kind of things. So we can quickly get the results and the information that we need. And then annually, do an evaluation. We do it for our teams. We do annual evaluations of our team's performance. Why on earth don't we do it at boards? I think the stat on the survey was, correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, but it was something ridiculous, like 20-30% of companies do some kind of annual evaluation. We've got to move past that. We've got to be accountable. Someone else, as an independent person, can do the report, but we need to take that on board and say, okay, we can do better. Because if we're not doing that, how on earth do we present to the rest of the organization that it's important? How on earth do we lead in the rest of the organization and say, you need to do this stuff if we're just not doing it ourselves? So ineffective boards, reasons for corporate failure, lack of effective board. There's always warning signs. Skills limitations, absence of experience in core business areas, inability of non-exec directors to hold senior executives account, all of that stuff is warning signs that something's going to happen. And if you do it over and over again, it's eventually going to collapse. So in summary, we've got a profile. Use a contribution compass tool. If you don't have one already, happy to help and support anybody who's interested. Make sure you clearly understand the attitudes that you need on the board, the attitudes you need in your different teams, the value systems in those teams and the organization as a whole, and the board in particular. Make sure you've written it down, documented it, put some training materials together so everybody understands what those values are. Do the work. Move to being a high EQ individual. I see my slides messed up again. Experience, directors, brave, confident, and there we are, skills. It's popped up again. So high EQ, develop the skills, do the training, build it into your budgets for the year. What does our director training look like for our board? Have we got some kind of training for our executives? Building succession planning, all of those kind of things are really critical. And the more complex and the more difficult things are, the more important that kind of stuff is, because it helps you cope better, with that complexity, with that chaos, if you have better training. If you don't do it, then things are more likely to go wrong, because you're just not using best practice or just using common sense even, because you're just trying to learn things as you go along. And get as much experience as you can. I really, really recommend, if you've only got an opportunity as an executive director and because you're running and founder of an organization, it's well worth trying to find some non-executive director role somewhere else, because it's how you learn the importance and the skills of being a director. And then you can bring that learning back into your own organization. But it's when you've disconnected the shareholding and the operations stuff and everything else, now you can truly think as a director on someone else's board and get an understanding of what that means and what that looks like, and how you can bring that knowledge and understanding back into your own organization and make it better. And be brave. Don't be afraid. Be confident, and learn and develop your skills will help with confidence. Learn, develop your experience will help with confidence. But at the end of the day, you have to just go for it and make those different calls, have those tough conversations. So thank you. I hope that was really helpful. We've got a few minutes for questions. What have we got in the questions box? And just in case you're interested, we have what we call the Applied Directorship Program, where all of this stuff is covered. We go through each of the areas of the governance compass, including quite a lot of detail on the contribution compass. This is Christo Dresses in Joburg, and one of our graduates really turned their business around based on that knowledge, and now all of their executive team have also done the program. From having no experience, I believe they gained basic and deep experience and knowledge of what value is required from a board member. Help me identify what areas are lacking in our board and company as a whole. So it'll not only will it help improve you, but it also helps improve the organization because it's applicable. It's applied directorship. So how do you apply it? Each module you go through in the course of 11 months, you can apply it in your own business as you go. And you can start to move your own organization in parallel with the learning. So we've got a short half-day workshop, board effectiveness workshop, introductory half-day, as I said. So it's the foundational stuff around the roles and responsibilities of director, the difference between shareholders, directors, and managers, how to build the team of a board. That's about it in that half-day. And then you can go on to much more comprehensive stuff with the Applied Directorship Program over 11 months. And we've got a cohort starting in August. So Jenny, if you can just put that poll up so people can just tick if there's anything else they'd like to see or hear about or get access to. Why can't I change this one? Can you put that poll up, Jenny? Mine's not letting me for some reason. It keeps doing the same one. Oh, here we go. Got it. So yeah, just tick the box. Whatever's relevant, all of them, none of them, some of them. There's one at the bottom that says, thank you for the presentation. If that's your response, fantastic. I'm really pleased that their presentation added value. If you'd like any other help with anything else, then we're here and we're happy to help you take your business to the next level. So looking at the Q&A, who have we got on here? So that one's done. You would like to answer this question. Done. Is it possible to get an email of this presentation? Yes, Jenny, we will be sending out the slides as far as I'm aware, and we'll also be sending out a link to the recording of this session. Risk management learning. There's, apart from doing our module, and I think we're going to be setting up a small course based on that particular module because it's a lot of people are asking for it. But there are a lot of materials around risk management. My advice would be start simple, and probably the simplest thing you can do is to develop a risk matrix. And that all that really is a list of all of the things that you understand are risks. The risk is that you could have a fire in your factory. There's a risk that your team could leave. There's a risk that you could have a flood. There's a risk that your main client could stop buying from you. List those, then you've got two columns. One is the impact. What is the financial impact? Rands, dollars, Ghanaian shillings, Kenyan shillings, Ghanaian cedis, whatever it is. What is that number? And then next to that is the likelihood. So the probability, the percentage of it's, and you can either do it in times a month or times a year or times a decade. You're just trying to get some kind of weighting. So if something is quite a small impact, but it happens really often, when you multiply the two together, you get quite a big number. And that moves that thing much higher the top of the list of things you need to deal with. So it doesn't have to be a massively expensive black swan event that you fix first. It could be something quite small that's happening every day. So that's how you try and get things in an order of priority. And don't try and do all of them. Just do the top 3, maybe the top 5 at the most. And then when you've done them, move on to the next. Because otherwise it can be so overwhelming. So get the teams to think about it, draw up the lists, do the weightings. focus on the ones that are really obvious, but make sure that you've got the amount of times it happens, not just the value, because that multiple can shift things up and down that list quite dramatically. And yes, as I said, there's all kinds of risk management systems out there, risk management methodologies relevant to particular industries. There's one for IT. I've completely forgotten it for the life of me at the moment. There's various ISO standards that talk to risk, etc. So I hope that helps. Mataza. Training can be sector. Would you say that your training can be sector specific? So we've tried to keep our training country and sector independent. So we're teaching how to be a board of a business, because a business plays by a set of game rules. There are fundamental things that a business needs to do. Then there will be sector and industry specific stuff. And some of it will cover, some of it we won't. So we're not going to go into the financial services rules or the listed company rules, etc., etc. That's not our skill set. But there are other consultants who can help you with that. What we want you to understand is fundamentally what is the role and responsibility of a shareholder, and what can they do and what can't they do. Fundamentally, what are you supposed to be doing in the boardroom as a director? What are your role and responsibilities? How do you act? How do you perform in the room? What do you do when you're in that room? How do you run that meeting so it's most effective? So I said, what do you do before the meeting? What do you do in the meeting? What do you do after the meeting? That kind of stuff. And that's the same across any business, charity, government committee, all of them follow the same kind of principles. So that's what we've tried to stick to. Practically, how do you do this stuff? Here's the theory, but practically, what do you do with that theory and how do you implement it? Any other questions? Anything in? Thank you. Just love to. Definitely. Okay, cool. Anything else? Any other questions? Our time is up. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope it was a valuable way of you spending an hour, and hope it's given you something to think about. And thank you for filling in the questionnaire. We'll follow up with those of you who've asked for more information or for a consult. I see a couple of people have asked for a consult with me. Happy to sit down with you and talk about your specific challenges and your needs and your company, where it is, what the next step looks like. So yes, if you want to consult, happy to do it. Love doing it. Really enjoy learning about other people's businesses and finding out how they got to where they got to. And if I can help you go to the next level, then absolutely I will try and do that. Good. Thank you very much. Have an awesome rest of the afternoon, and hopefully see you at our next session, which will be communicated via email, because we've got your email addresses now. We can just give you details of, as I said, the slides, the link to the recording, and you'll probably receive details of the next webinar, which Beverly and I are doing in about 2 or 3 weeks' time on a similar topic, but going through some real case studies. So that'll be, if you've enjoyed this and you've learned from this, then I think that's the sort of next step and will be very valuable. So keep well. As I said, have a good afternoon and see you at the next event. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye for now.